There is a complete and all-out civil war within the Trump regime right now. You have the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, joining with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other neocons to try to attack and even potentially oust J.D. Vance. And you have the CIA leaking things to who else but Barack Ravid, who's basically Donald Trump's propagandist, and they are hinting to Ravid and Axios that they may have the goods on Donald Trump and also J.D. Vance about Donald Trump's dark past. Let me tie this all together about what's happening, as you have many in the Trump regime who are livid that J.D. Vance was instrumental in getting this memorandum of understanding done with Iran. And you have all of these forces also uniting with the Mossad of Israel and Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and others in Israel to try to undermine and destroy this tenuous memorandum of understanding, which has already been digitally signed and which is expected to be signed in person in Geneva on Friday. Let me show you what's going on behind the scenes. So let's talk about what was leaked to Barack Ravid of Axios. Scoop. CIA Director Ratcliffe told President Trump and other officials that intelligence gathered by the U.S. raised serious doubts about Iran's willingness to make the nuclear concessions the U.S. is seeking in any final deal. During those meetings, Trump and his team discussed intelligence gathered by several U.S. intelligence agencies, which showed that the way Iranian officials were discussing the deal among themselves was inconsistent with what they were telling the mediators and the U.S., two sources said. Ratcliffe isn't the only skeptic in Trump's top team. Secretary of State Rubio and Secretary of Defense Hegseth have both expressed concerns and raised questions about the deal and internal discussions, while Vance and U.S. envoys Witkoff and Jared Kushner advocated for it. Now, Warhawk neocon Mark Levin put out the following statement. Check this out. I detest the leaking, especially to Axios. I seriously doubt it was Ratcliffe, CIA director. No idea why the administration uses that trash outlet, referring to Axios. But here it is, and it's important, until or if it is denied. And Mark Levin went on to push these talking points that are also now being leaked by the CIA to try to destroy this deal. And when we talk about the leaks coming out of the Trump regime and the civil war taking place among the Trump cabinet members, basically all Trump cabinet members against J.D. Vance as well as Kushner and Witkoff, I mean, I want to show you what happened last night on state regime media, which calls itself Fox, where retired four-star General Jack Keane talked about his reliable sourcing, talking about what is in the deal. And Jack Keane was going on state regime media to call out J.D. Vance and to call out this deal with Iran. Watch for yourself. Let's play it.
Action will be taken. But I can't square some of the things that are coming out of the administration from reliable sources. That's what I find so disturbing. When I heard it from the Iranians, Sean, I dismissed it. I said, that's the same nonsense we were always hearing. Well, but when I hear from administration sources some of the things that you have heard of what's in this deal, that makes no sense whatsoever. It's not defensible. I think what the president should do is just let's release it and let people see what's out there so we stop debating about something none of us has seen.
Well, you got the assurances from the vice president tonight.
And then you had more from retired four-star General Jack Keane right here attacking the current memorandum of understanding. Let's play it.
I want to believe that. But if you have a reliable, high-level administration source saying we're not going to get rid of the dust, we're going to downblend it, that leaves them with enrichment.
The vice president just contradicted that.
And we're not going to take their centrifuges, and they're not going to take centrifuges out, and they're not going to take the cascades out, which means you can have weapons grade. And there's going to be a moratorium in terms of you can't have a nuclear deal for 10, 20 years, similar to the JCPOA.
More from Keane over here about the $300 billion investment fund that is in this deal or memorandum of understanding. Here, let's play it.
You can't have a nuclear deal for 10, 20 years, similar to the JCPOA. And the funding is real. There's a $300 billion investment fund. Who cares where the money comes from? If it doesn't come from the United States, I get that. Of course it shouldn't. But it shouldn't come from anybody. I mean, when we recovered Germany and Japan, the Nazis weren't in charge. The Japanese imperialists weren't in charge. Here, the Iranians are in charge. The killers and thugs are still in charge. We don't give them that money because what are they going to do with it? They're going to recover everything we've taken away from them. Who cares whether it's coming from the Arabs, from the Qataris, or whatever? They don't get it. They shouldn't get any of it. That's just the reality of it. They're going to take that money and recover everything. And you know that, Sean. You know that you can't trust these people.
I don't trust the Iranians. I'm a trust but verify guy.
And if you want even more signs of the civil war within the Trump cabinet right now, take a look where J.D. Vance will be appearing today. Yep, J.D. Vance is going to be on the Megyn Kelly show. And as Trump MAGA sycophant Laura Loomer writes, bizarre. Why would our vice president go on Megyn Kelly's show? Megyn Kelly is constantly bashing Donald Trump. And she recently said MAGA is dead and that Trump is losing his mind. And so J.D. Vance is going on Megyn Kelly and she's promoting his book. And Megyn Kelly just had on Glenn Greenwald, who said the following. Here, play this clip.
So what we do have is the outline, basically, of a deal. And we can talk about the deal, and we absolutely should. I think what we are going to see end up happening, and it's extremely ironic given that it was kind of a central promise of the Trump 2016 campaign, the Trump first term, to claim that the JCPOA was the worst deal ever negotiated, that we had to immediately withdraw from it because it was such a threat to American national security. That was the Israeli view. But from the American perspective, that deal, I'm not saying it was perfect, but it certainly worked to keep Iran from doing things like enriching past 3.67%. They only started enriching at 60% after Trump withdrew from the deal. And what we're going to have is a deal that's similar to that, though probably without as many of the intrusive safeguards that original deal had, on top of which Iran has been unbelievably emboldened and strengthened by the fact that they stood down the world's most powerful military, and none of the stated goals that the United States government insisted it was intending to fulfill at the start of the war, not all of them, but none of them has really been fulfilled. Iran's government is obviously still very much in place. Their ballistic missile system has been somewhat degraded, but they could easily replace it. Their drone capacity is very high. They still have that enriched uranium buried under the soil. They still have the right to enrich. They're still able to fund what are called proxies in the region. I mean, none of the stated goals that the Israelis and the Americans at the start of the war said the war was about have been fulfilled.
Now, it should also be noted what's going on in Israel with the Mossad, what's going on with Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben Gvir. Obviously, the CIA works very closely with the Mossad, and behind the scenes, it seems that they are working closely together to try to undermine the signing of this memorandum of understanding in Geneva on Friday. Pay close attention to what's happening because, noticeably, you have Netanyahu giving speeches where he tries to downplay the rift with Donald Trump, and he's not acting overtly in a way that calls out Donald Trump and the regime. But behind the scenes, you need to watch what's actually happening because Netanyahu's trying to make it not look obvious what Israel's going to try to execute before Friday. I think working with the Mossad and the CIA behind the scenes to try to create another Gulf of Tonkin type incident, to create another incident where they claim the U.S. Apache helicopter was hit by an Iranian drone, a Shahid drone, but it managed to miraculously escape. Pay very close attention to what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, because my view is the Mossad and the CIA may be working together to try to arrange something there to try to provoke the U.S. back into open hostilities. Take a look at what's happening here. So Yinon Magal, who is a kind of Netanyahu top propagandist. This tells you and tells me everything I need to know about what's going on behind the scenes. He's like Netanyahu's Hannity, if you will, right? He goes, Trump came out a loser due to the deliberate and focused pressure from two little Jews, Witkoff and Kushner, whom Qatar bought for a lot of money and who sold out their brothers in Israel, and with the assistance of Vice President Vance, the lowlife, and with the encouragement and pleading of the Gulf midget states who are afraid of their own shadow and volunteered to pay billions to Iranians just so the quiet returns. So we're left alone and we will win alone because the victory of Israel does not lie. Meanwhile, we stay in Lebanon and continue the fighting, and we respond if they shoot at us, and we attack whoever threatens us. We strengthen the government and its leader, who is the right man at the right time to deal with this situation. And he goes on to say Benjamin Netanyahu. That reflects what Benjamin Netanyahu is actually saying behind the scenes right now, better than any other encapsulation.
And now let me interrupt for a minute with some huge news on climate. So the Trump administration just quietly waved the white flag on one of its biggest attacks on clean energy. You probably recall that on day one of his second term, one of the first things he did, Trump signed an executive order freezing all federal wind energy permits, offshore and onshore. Essentially, he was trying to kill the wind industry with the stroke of a pen. You know how Donald Trump speaks about wind all the time. Well, 17 states, led by New York, took him to court, and in December, a federal judge ruled against Trump, throwing out that permitting freeze, and the administration appealed. But here's the thing, they never actually submitted a brief defending their position. And in the beginning of June, when that deadline finally came, instead of fighting, Trump's own Department of Justice filed to dismiss the appeal. They gave up. Now I want to give a quick shout out to Emily Pontecorvo at Heatmap for this major scoop. So what does this mean in plain terms? Well, the door to federal wind permitting is now back open. Developers can move forward. Billions in clean energy investment that were in limbo can get back on track. This is a huge win for the climate, for clean energy jobs, and for the states that stood up and fought back. Huge, huge, huge news, folks. And I want to hear from you. What do you think about this story? What do you think about our climate coverage here in general? What do you think about the Trump administration's ongoing war on clean energy? Now is the time to sound off. Drop your comments right now below. I'll be reading every single one of them. Okay, Ben? Back to you.
And so what do I think the Mossad and CIA and Netanyahu and Ratcliffe and Rubio and Hegseth are doing behind the scenes also? I don't think it's a coincidence that a headline came out as such. Trump aides fear that Maggie Haberman and Swan obtained Situation Room tapes for regime change. You'll recall last Friday, the New York Times, or Thursday, did a bombshell report about what was taking place in the Situation Room regarding Donald Trump's dark past and Donald Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump's direct involvement in the cover-up of the Epstein files, his connections with Epstein, and Donald Trump's really sickening and disgusting past. Now, one of the things that is being leaked, guess where, to Axios, is that Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan have direct quotes from the Situation Room, and thus people behind the scenes, end quote, speculate, or senior people in the Trump regime speculate that there was audio recordings of all of this, of everything that was happening in the Situation Room, especially regarding Epstein, that someone managed to bring a recorder in or bring their iPhone in, breaching all of the protocols of the Situation Room, obviously, to record these types of conversations, everything that Donald Trump was saying and directing. So if you put these pieces together, I think this is another leverage point that's being exerted in this civil war against Donald Trump, in this civil war against J.D. Vance, that we've got the tapes. We've got audio recordings, not just as it relates to Situation Room conversations about Iran, but also as it relates to Donald Trump's dark past. Specifically, Top White House officials believe New York Times reporter Haberman and Swan obtained audio recordings because of the direct verbatim quotes. The authors conducted more than 1,000 interviews for Regime Change, which covers Donald Trump's second term. So you also have Donald Trump pushing J.D. Vance out, and J.D. Vance is basically the lone voice right now defending this memorandum of understanding, which is to be signed on Friday. And one of the ways J.D. Vance is defending it, and this is making Ratcliffe and Hegseth and Rubio, and of course Netanyahu, those in the Mossad, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, others livid, is J.D. Vance is referring to the memorandum of understanding as cool. And he keeps on saying, this is cool. How cool is it that we're going to be friends and we're going to develop a relationship with Iran right now? Here is what J.D. Vance just said. Let's play this clip.
The coolest thing about the progress we've made over the last few weeks is that you see people within the Iranian system, senior leadership, even IRGC officials say, you know what? We may have some animosity, we may have some mistrust, but we recognize the way that we've done business with the United States for 47 years is a mistake. Let's try something else. We're going to verify that, of course, but we're certainly willing to try something else if they comply.
Now, notably, if you go back, there are some other hints here as well about what's going on with the CIA, what's going on with the leaks, what's going on with the Mossad. Let me give you a few data points. Remember a few weeks back, Israeli intelligence sources accused J.D. Vance of leaking Mossad plans to use Kurdish forces against Iran directly to Turkey's President Erdogan, who then lobbied Donald Trump to kill it. Let's talk about these leaks that are taking place. How about this leak that took place? And you'll be able to, I think, piece this all together and add it all up. Before the Iran war, Netanyahu privately briefed Trump in the White House Situation Room. He presented a bold, quick-win plan to strike Iran, destroy missiles, avoid retaliation, and even trigger regime change. Trump liked it immediately. Sounds good to me. But then you had some U.S. intelligence pushing back hard, saying military strikes doable, regime change farcical. Advisors warned Israel was overselling, but Trump brushed off these concerns. Regime change, that's their problem. He focused on killing leadership, crushing Iran's military, believing it would be fast and decisive. Trump asked each advisor for input. Vance, bad idea, but I'll support you. Rubio, only supportive goal, military, not regime change. Military outlined risks, but didn't oppose. Legal said it was permissible. Political team warned of backlash. No one firmly blocked the decision. And remember, the New York Times reported on those leaks in the Situation Room, and you had the Atlantic report on it as well. So I think one of the questions that a lot of people are asking themselves is, who's been making these recordings in the Situation Room? Is Vance making these recordings in the Situation Room? Is the CIA making it? Are they both making recordings and having this proxy war, if you will? Certain leaks to Axios, certain leaks to New York Times and the Atlantic about who's going to be able to destroy the other side's reputation as the Trump regime, is crumbling from within. And I think it's important to also note Donald Trump's general view as it relates to the CIA. You'll recall Donald Trump consistently makes posts like this. CIA had foreign allies spy on Trump team, triggering Russia collusion hoax, sources say. And so Trump's always believed that the CIA, even potentially working with the Mossad, that they've been spying on Donald Trump and that Trump, is a victim of CIA spying. So that's always in the background of Donald Trump's mind as well. And I'll also note what, Ro Khanna has been saying now that we know what's happened in the Situation Room as it relates to Donald Trump's dark past. Here's what Khanna had to say. Let's play this clip.
Congressman, I want to ask you first about one of the bits of reporting in that piece that was about the fact that they had discovered that contrary to repeated things that Donald Trump had said, that he was never on the plane. That was like a real go-to line of his, going all the way back to 2015. These people were on the plane. I was never on the plane. That in a January 2020 email, a federal prosecutor told a colleague Trump had actually flown on Epstein's private jet, far more than anyone knew. Flight records in the files showed at least 8 trips between 93 and 96, sometimes with his second wife, Marla Maples, sometimes with his children. In January 2024, Trump declared he had never been on the plane. Did you know that when you were sort of pushing for this transparency?
No, I didn't. Even in Watergate, you didn't have the vice president sitting with the attorney general in the situation room saying we need to cover this up, that there are documents that could be incriminating for the president, that we have a real problem not releasing these files, and then contemplating what they can do to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't lose his base. And, you know, when Massey and I were doing this, we honestly didn't think it would have this kind of political ramifications. I mean, we understood the impact on survivors, but obviously they did. And they were in a panic mode, which neither Massey or I realized the extent of.
And more from Kana right here. And again, this is as being reported by Maggie Haberman and Swan, who seemed to have the audio tapes about what was going on behind the scenes. Here, let's play this clip.
One of the things that comes through in this reporting, again, this is not our reporting, this comes from Haberman and Swan at the Times. They have a book coming out that includes some of this, is that one of the things they're contemplating in those meetings is like how much, literally almost explicitly, how much should we cover up and how much should we disclose? Like the question on the table is, should we actually put this out? And one of the things that makes me think is, look, there are millions of documents that they are holding back, I think, through dubious legal arguments. And given the fact that we know that essentially from this reporting, they were contemplating explicitly covering stuff up, it does make you really got to wonder about the stuff they're not disclosing.
Absolutely. And we know what hasn't been disclosed. How do we know? Because the survivors' lawyers have seen a lot of these files and they've told us. And what is not being disclosed is the survivors' statements to FBI agents naming other men, naming other people who were part of the Epstein files, Epstein abuse. And what also is not being named and disclosed is things concerning Donald Trump.
So I think it is vital that we pay attention over the next 3 or 4 days. Will there be a engineered provocation, if you will, to try to bring everybody back to war before the signing on Friday? And it does seem, based on what Barack Ravid's reporting is that you have this camp of Ratcliffe and Rubio and Hegseth who are not going on to talk about this, who are not trying to justify this deal. And they're basically saying, Vance, it's all you, while undermining Vance as well. And so I'll leave you with this clip right here of J.D. Vance being asked by Hannity, what's your relationship like with Donald Trump? And notice what Hannity does here, because I think this is a big tell. Hannity seems to be being fed this. Hannity goes, well, it's interesting because you attacked Donald Trump in 2020. And Vance goes, no, it was 2016. But think about knowing that Donald Trump was watching that. Hannity wanted to remind Trump that Vance, and who do you think strategically is giving this information, framing it to Hannity this way so that J.D. Vance admits that, yeah, I did attack Donald Trump. Remember, he called Donald Trump like America's Hitler or something like that, right? And so to me, this was one of the biggest tells about what's being engineered behind the scenes. Watch for yourself.
I get into this argument with President Trump. I'm not sure if I'm going to heaven. I said, John 3:16, God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten son. And it's funny because he has his own spiritual side.
He does.
When you think of your background, and as I was reading the book, and it's so different than President Trump in many ways. However, your relationship is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you even attacked him in 2020.
Well, in 2016.
2016.
But what?
Well, there you have it. Let me know what you think about that all. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. And thank you so much for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.